Sophie Cunningham's cuddle demand to Caitlin Clark fuels Fever reunion buzz. Say what?
So Sophie Cunningham just dropped a throwback clip featuring Caitlin Clark, and Clark's three-word comeback has everyone in the WNBA buzzing. Sophie came back with some playful talk about cuddling and dinner plans, but underneath all that joking around sits a crucial decision that Indiana's front office can't avoid. With expansion drafts approaching and free agency stuck in limbo, this whole thing is way messier than it appears on the surface.
Many Indiana Fever fans want nothing more than for their team to bring Sophie Cunningham back in free agency this winter, whenever the WNBA league office and its players agree to a new CBA. Of course, Cunningham isn't the only member of the Indiana 2025 team that fans are clamoring to bring back, as Kelsey Mitchell is just as beloved among the fan base. But while Mitchell might make more of an impact on the court compared to Cunningham, the latter's off-court charisma and star power have endeared her to the Fever fan base to an impressive degree.
Here's the real question though. Should Indiana use one of their expansion draft protection spots on Sophie Cunningham, even if it means another key player gets left exposed? Let me know what you really think in the comments. So here's what happened. Sophie threw up this Instagram throwback showing her and Caitlin having a connection moment during last season. Nothing fancy, just a quick clip of two teammates who obviously clicked on the court when Caitlin drops her response. 3 simple words that got Fever fans completely worked up. Time to run it back. That's all she said. 3 words, but when you consider everything happening in the WNBA right now, with free agency completely frozen, CBA talks going nowhere fast, and expansion drafts hanging over everyone's heads, those 3 words pack way more punch than just casual social media chatter. Sophie's comeback was even better. She goes, "Only if you cuddle and make me dinner twice a week." Pure teammate banter. Obviously she's messing around, but here's what actually matters about this whole exchange. It's a clear signal. Caitlin Clark wants Sophie Cunningham back with the Fever, and Sophie's all in on returning. Before we dive into what this actually means for how Indiana builds their roster, we've got to talk about the absolute madness that took over the comments section. Someone actually asked whether Caitlin Clark has ever been unfaithful to her boyfriend Connor, all because 2 teammates were joking around on social media. This is exactly the exhausting nonsense that comes with covering this league. 2 players can't even have normal friendly banter without part of the fan base trying to create some ridiculous drama that has zero connection to basketball. Caitlin Clark is committed to Connor McCaffrey. Sophie Cunningham is straight. They're friends and former teammates having fun on Instagram. That's literally the entire story. Can we please focus on actual basketball now? Here's what really matters in this situation. Sophie Cunningham ranked as the 2nd most searched female athlete in America during 2024, based on Google's year-end numbers. Not just 2nd in the WNBA, 2nd among every female athlete in the entire country. She's running a podcast through the Volume Network with Colin Cowherd. She's appearing on major media shows consistently. She's developed a real fan base that goes way beyond just basketball fans.
Let me remind you, she was also the only player in the entire league that we sat back and witnessed literally physically defend Caitlin Clark on the court. Just keeping it real. Watched a lot of other teammates just stand around while Sophie trying to scrap.
And here's the crazy part. She only spent 1 season with the Fever. Let that sink in for a moment. 12 months in Indiana, and she became the 2nd most Googled female athlete in America. That's not just her personality or her podcast doing the work. That's the massive platform that comes with being Caitlin Clark's teammate. But now Indiana faces a really tricky situation because of how expansion drafts work. Portland and Toronto are joining the league, and Indiana has to shield their core players from getting grabbed. Most expansion drafts let you protect 5 or 6 players maximum. That's it.
News is Indiana doesn't necessarily have to choose when it comes to getting Cunningham or Mitchell. Both players have expressed interest in returning. The Fever's front office will have enough money and flexibility to re-sign them both if they so desire.
Caitlin Clark, Aaliyah Boston, Lexi Hall, and Melissa Smith are absolutely getting protected. That's 4 slots used up, leaving Indiana with maybe 1 or 2 protection spots for everybody else. This is where things get complicated, because Kelsey Mitchell and Sophie Cunningham are both unrestricted free agents who've said publicly they want to stay in Indiana. The positive news is Indiana doesn't have to pick between bringing back Cunningham or Mitchell. Both players want to return, and the Fever front office should have the money and roster flexibility to re-sign them both if that's their plan. But here's the issue: if they bring both back before the expansion draft happens, they have to protect both of them, which uses up 2 of their very limited protection spots. So let's think through what happens if they leave Sophie unprotected because they can't or won't burn a protection slot on her. Portland and Toronto are starting from 0. They need players who can put fans in seats and create media buzz right away. Sophie Cunningham hits both targets. She's a solid rotation player who brings real star power and marketing appeal. If she's sitting there in that expansion draft, she's getting picked. No doubt about it. Probably early, maybe even first overall. New franchises need recognizable faces. They need players who can show up on local radio and podcasts and actually pull an audience. They need someone who can create instant fan excitement and media coverage. Portland and Toronto are entering a league where Caitlin Clark just shattered attendance records and TV ratings. They're looking at a situation where star power and media presence matter more than ever in WNBA history. Sophie Cunningham is exactly what expansion teams are hunting for, but there's another element that doesn't appear in marketing studies or Google search numbers. Go back and watch the footage from last season. When Caitlin Clark got fouled hard, when she got knocked around, when opponents were taking cheap shots at the league's biggest attraction, who was the only Fever player consistently stepping up physically? Sophie Cunningham. She was the one teammate who would actually get confrontational and stick up for Clark on the court, not just give lip service in post-game interviews, but actually step up in real time when it counted. That aspect of team culture and locker room dynamics doesn't appear on any stat sheet, but it definitely matters. The Fever had players who put up better numbers than Cunningham last season, but they didn't have anyone else who brought that specific readiness to physically back up their star player when situations got heated. And in a league where Caitlin Clark is going to keep getting targeted by opponents, having someone who's actually ready to step up and protect her has real value. Now let's discuss Kelsey Mitchell, because she's clearly part of this whole equation. Mitchell put up 17 points per game last season and has been the team's most reliable scorer for years. She's obviously the priority from a pure basketball perspective, but if Indiana can only protect one of their unrestricted free agents in the expansion draft, the basketball choice and the business choice might lead to different answers. Mitchell is definitely the superior player, but Cunningham might be the bigger loss if she winds up in Portland or Toronto, because she brings things that are much harder to replace through free agency or the draft. She brings media attention, fan nation, defensive intensity, and chemistry with the franchise player. And that takes us back to that Instagram moment. It wasn't just friendly joking around, it was a public message. Caitlin Clark wants Sophie back. She made that obvious for everyone to see. And when your generational talent is telling you she wants a particular teammate back, you pay attention. Not just because it keeps your superstar satisfied, but because she's recognizing something about team chemistry and compatibility that might not be obvious from the outside. Look at Sophie's real contribution beyond just the statistics last season. The Fever transformed from a broken lottery team into a playoff squad. Part of that was Clark showing up. Part of it was Aliyah Boston getting better. But part of it was also bringing in veterans like Cunningham, who knew how to play next to a ball-dominant guard and didn't need to be the main focus. She took charges, she knocked down open threes, she defended with aggression, she brought energy off the bench. Those are exactly the traits you want around a young superstar who's going to handle the ball most possessions. Sophie didn't demand plays designed for her. She didn't whine about her role, she just handled the tough work that winning teams require. The timing is crucial here too. Free agency can't begin until the CBA gets finished. And CBA negotiations are completely stuck over revenue sharing and salary cap issues. Nobody has any idea when that gets worked out. Could be next week, could be next month. But whenever it finally happens, there's going to be a rushed free agency period, followed right away by expansion draft preparation. The Fever can't afford to wait and see how the market shapes up. They need to make choices quickly about who they're making a priority and who they're willing to risk losing. That's why this Instagram exchange is more significant than it might appear. It's pushing the conversation into public view where the front office has to deal with what their franchise player is asking for. Here's another angle that doesn't get enough attention. What happens if Sophie lands in Portland or Toronto and becomes a legitimate featured player? She's 28 years old, hitting her peak years with a demonstrated ability to create media attention and fan interest. Put her in a starring role on an expansion team that's creating an identity from nothing, and she could definitely emerge as something special. Maybe not as a first-team All-WNBA selection, but as a fan favorite who moves merchandise and fills arenas in a new market. That's extremely valuable for an expansion franchise. And if the Fever let her leave for nothing or lose her in the expansion draft because they didn't protect her, that's a missed chance that could sting for years. The opposite argument is pretty clear though. The Fever can't construct their roster around feelings and social media buzz. They need to focus on winning basketball games. Kelsey Mitchell is clearly a better scorer. Lexi Hall demonstrated real growth last season. Nalissa Smith is a former second overall pick. If protecting Sophie means exposing one of those players to the expansion draft, maybe that's not the smart basketball decision. But here's the reality about modern professional sports. The separation between basketball value and entertainment value is less clear than it's ever been. The WNBA just secured a TV contract worth $200 million annually, up from $50 million. That huge jump wasn't because of competitive balance or playoff excitement. It happened because Caitlin Clark created record viewership and unprecedented mainstream coverage. The league is finally getting compensated for its entertainment value, not just its basketball quality. In that world, a player like Sophie Cunningham, who brings authentic media presence and fan engagement, has more worth than traditional basketball analytics would indicate. She might not be an all-star, but she's someone casual viewers actually know and want to watch. So where does this put the Fever? They're staring at a choice that every front office dreads, picking between solid options with no obvious correct answer. They could re-sign both Mitchell and Cunningham, protect them both, and risk losing someone else important in the expansion draft. They could make Mitchell the priority, let Sophie explore free agency, and hope she either comes back or doesn't get grabbed by the expansion team. Or they could make the bold move and secure Sophie specifically because of her off-court impact and her connection with Clark, even if that means making a tough choice somewhere else on the roster. What we can say for sure is this: Caitlin Clark wants Sophie Cunningham back. The fan base wants Sophie back. Sophie wants to return. The question is whether the front office values what she contributes enough to make it work. And if they don't, if they let her go or leave her unprotected and she ends up becoming a crowd favorite in Portland or Toronto, they better be confident about whoever they picked instead. Because that's a public relations disaster that haunts you for years, especially when your franchise player publicly requested that teammates return. So Sophie Cunningham and Caitlin Clark want to run it back, but the Fever front office has to work out how to make that reality without sacrificing other important pieces in the expansion draft. This choice is going to shape Indiana's entire offseason. If you want more WNBA roster analysis and free agency breakdowns, hit that like button and subscribe right now.